Hi, a film I watched last night that I'd been interested in seeing for some time but hadn't got round to having the opportunity was The Remains of the Day. It's a Merchant Ivory production famed for their period dramas and adaptations of literary sources, but unlike many of their other books, and their other films rather, it's based on a more recent book. The film was made in 1993, and the book had been published a few years earlier. It's by the Japanese British author Katsuo Ishiguro, and it's the story of a butler in a landed gentry household in the decade before the Second World War. His name is Stevens, played by Anthony Hopkins, and he runs the house beautifully. He is utterly devoted to the service of his master, Lord Darlington, to the exclusion of all else. He has no real personality, no real feelings beyond devoting himself in service to the household. This becomes a source of conflict, however, when a new housekeeper is appointed, Miss Kenton, played by Emma Thompson, with whom they have at first a somewhat adversarial relationship. Miss Kenton is also very organized, structured, and excellent at her job, but she is much more uh, emotional and much more um, less likely to be constrained by their environment. Um, Stephen's father acts as under butler in the household, and he reprimands very gently Miss Kenton for referring to him by his first name instead of calling him Mr. Stevens or Mr. Stevens Senior. However, the time that they spend together, their relationship gradually changes and a mutual respect develops. However, although it clearly develops further than that, the social structures and the belief that one should devote oneself to the service of one's master means that Stevens never vocalizes his genuine affection or even love of Miss Kenton. The story is narrated in flashback from the late 1950s. Darlington Hall has since been sold, and we find out why eventually. And it's now under the ownership of Mr. Lewis, a retired American politician who is a little less formal than Lord Darlington was, but still very pleasant and charming and respects Stevens a great deal. He gets a letter from Miss Kenton, who's now Mrs. Ben, that she would be interested in meeting Mr. Stevens again. So Stevens travels from Darlington Hall near Oxford down to the West Country. And in flashback, we see the story being told of the time that they spent together. I really like this film. I've normally been quite allergic to um, period dramas. I find them often quite stiff and staid, and no one says anything they really mean. But here, the point is that no one says anything they really mean. No one is willing to break the codes of propriety in order to express their true feelings. So while the relationship between Stevens and Miss Kenton is in the foreground, in the background, we see the rise of the Nazis and extreme right wing politics. Lord Darlington is sympathetic towards Hitler, and a number of meetings that take place at the house that pave the way towards the Second World War, in particular towards the end when he hosts a private meeting between the Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and Hitler's ambassador in London, Joachim von Ribbentrop. But Stevens keeps everything at a remove. He has no political opinions. He has no uh, feeling that he should make any judgment on such things, only to give himself in service. There is a scene earlier on where two young refugee girls are given maid jobs in the house, and Stevens is perfectly happy to accept them at their word and their references. And it's only shortly afterwards that we realise that they're not just German; they're German Jews. And Stevens again has absolutely no concern with employing Jews in the household; never even crosses his mind. But nevertheless, they're fired. And Stevens, although he disagrees with the decision, as he mentions privately, he never questions it because it is his master's choice. The performances are superb across the board. Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson are brilliant as Stevens and Miss Kenton, possibly the best performances of their career. James Fox as Lord Darlington is excellent. Christopher Reeve has a comparatively small role as Mr. Lewis, but is nevertheless very engaging and shows great warmth. And there are a number of noticeable supporting roles. Hugh Grant in a pre-Four Weddings role as Lord Darlington's godson has a noticeable small role. Um, Tim Pickett-Smith and Peter Vaughan as Mr. Stevens Senior. It's a beautifully made film, um, brilliantly written, brilliantly acted. Um, it's the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. It's actually a deeply passionate film because it's all about the passions that are under the surface and are subsumed. Passions for of love of politics that Stevens keeps closely controlled within himself because of his belief that the right thing to do is to devote one's life entirely to service. Um, my grandmother, in fact, was in service when she was a young girl. She was a maid in the household of Lady Violet Bonham Carter, who was the sister of the then Prime Minister, Herbert Asquith. So it was interesting to watch the film and think that one of these supporting characters, one of these maids you see scuttling by in the background, could be my own grandmother. So it gave me a personal connection to the film. But even despite that, I found it immensely engaging, um, absolutely watchable. I was not in the slightest bored or disengaged at any point during the film. It's a masterclass in acting, brilliantly economical writing. I would recommend it very highly indeed. It's excellent.